He pushed open the stable door, the hinges shrieking against the howling storm. A massive body writhed in the damp straw, shoulders as broad as two wooden planks. Her back was covered in bruised lash marks. When she looked up, the golden eyes of an Apache warrior instantly made Elias tighten his grip on the lantern. She was at least 7 feet tall, over 2 meters and 10 centimeters, strong and rippling with muscles despite her exhaustion. "Stay back." Her voice was hoarse, broken by shallow breaths and the biting cold. Elias did not move back, but he did not reach for his gun either. He saw the snapped bindings, the torn wounds at her wrists, and the quiet blaze of desperation burning in her eyes. "You are on my land," Elias said slowly. "I do not want trouble. Are you hungry?" She tilted her head, eyes wary like a hunted animal. No answer. Elias placed a bowl of food on the wooden floor, then stepped back. "If you want it, eat." After a long while, the Apache woman crawled forward, trembling as she picked at the food with her hands. As Elias turned away, she spoke so faintly, it was almost a whisper. You will not hand me over to them?" Elias replied with just one sentence, short and solid as bedrock. "I do not sell people." The snowstorm did not stop. Night after night, the wind slammed against the cabin walls as if trying to tear apart the fragile shelter of 2 human beings. After bandaging the wounds of the Apache woman, Elias decided to let her stay in the cabin, not because he trusted her, but because he knew one more night out in the stable, and she would freeze to death. Nanea, that was the name she spoke when Elias asked, lay near the door, where the draft was coldest, her hand always gripping the small knife he had given her during first aid. Elias did not object. Anyone who had survived to adulthood in the West had learned to trust instinct before trusting people. By the 3rd morning, the snow was so deep it had buried the water trough outside. The cabin had turned into a wooden box trapped in a sea of white. Elias was tending the fire when Nanea suddenly asked, "Why? Are you not afraid of me?" Elias simply shrugged. "You are big, strong, but the cold is scarier than you." That made Nanea glance at him, puzzled. She had never met anyone who spoke to an Apache warrior with such ease. Later that same day, while Elias was stacking firewood in the corner, he said half-jokingly, "If this winter keeps us trapped much longer, folks in town will start saying I plan to start a whole family before spring." Nanea turned to look at him, the corner of her mouth lifting into a cold, proud smile, the kind only an Apache woman who had never bowed to anyone could give. She said, every word like the edge of a blade, "I would sleep with you and have children with an ordinary man." Elias laughed, not the least bit offended. "Hearing it out loud from you, I have to admit, it does sound reckless." Nanea scoffed, but when she turned away, her eyes glinted with something else, not disdain, but something closer to surprise at the calmness of the man before her. That night, the snow fell even heavier. The wind howled around the cabin, making long, beast-like roars. Elias added more firewood to the stove and laid a thick blanket over Nanea. "Do not move too much, or the wounds will tear," he said. Nanea looked at him through the flickering firelight for the first time, not with the eyes of someone ready to strike down anyone who came too close. She asked softly, her voice a little gentler, "Why are you doing this?" Elias answered simply, without a pause, "Do not let anyone die in my house. That is all." Outside, the storm still raged across the snowy mountains, but inside the cramped little cabin, the distance between the two began to shrink, even if neither one would admit it. Ever since Nanea had stayed in the cabin, every night was the same. She slept restlessly, her breathing sometimes heavy, sometimes broken, occasionally jolting awake as if ready to strike down some invisible threat. Elias noticed, but he never asked. He did not want to rip open a wound she was still trying to cover with silence. One evening, when the storm had eased a little, Elias sat by the fire, sharpening a blade. The flames cast shadows across his sun-worn face. After many minutes of silence, it was Nanea who finally spoke. "I was not born to hide in a little house like this," she said, eyes gazing into the distance. "I am a warrior of the Atsa bloodline. Since childhood, I was trained to ride, to hunt, to fight, and never bow to anyone." Elias set the blade down. "But right now, you are running For the first time, she did not respond with anger. Nanea sighed a deep breath that seemed to carry the weight of an entire mountain range. They ambushed me when I was alone, tied me up, sold me through 3 towns. Those filthy men, their eyes. I would rather die out in the snow than fall back into their hands. Elias said nothing. Nanea gently touched one of the lash marks on her shoulder. I fought back. Killed 1, wounded 2. But there were too many. They beat me until the knife handle snapped in my hand. Elias walked to the wooden cabinet, pulled out a bottle of herbal medicine, and placed it in her hand. She looked surprised. You are not going to ask anything else? Elias answered, his voice low and steady like the oak tree at the front door. What happened does not make you weaker. It only tells me how strong you really are. Nanea paused. Her face, usually as cold as stone, softened for a moment, just a flicker. But enough for Elias to glimpse the part of her she always kept hidden. Later, as Elias returned to the fireplace, Nanea spoke again, her voice quiet, almost a whisper into the flames. No one has ever treated me like you do. No one has ever let me stay in their home without wanting something in return. Elias did not turn around. He simply said, You are breathing. You need a place to sleep. That is reason enough for me. Nanea looked at him for a long time, a look no longer laced with suspicion, but with something else, something she did not want to name. Outside, the snowy night began to calm, but inside Nanea's heart, a different kind of storm had begun to change its course. That afternoon, the sky suddenly darkened, even though the sun had not yet begun to set. Elias was chopping wood behind the cabin when the sound of horse hooves broke across the snow, fast, impatient, and full of bad intentions. He squinted toward the thin white road. 2 men on horseback were heading straight for the cabin, like they already knew exactly where they were going. Elias recognized them immediately. Hardened faces. The kind that hunted down native people to sell like livestock. One of them gave a cold smirk, his voice thick with the stench of cheap beer. Good evening, Hawkins. Heard you're harboring some mighty large cargo. Elias stood tall, not flinching. You boys should turn around and go back where you came from. The other one glanced around, tapping his boot against the cabin door. That Apache girl belongs to us. Think you can hide her? We've got good noses for this kind of thing. Elias crossed his arms, his voice flat and cold as forged steel. She does not belong to anyone. The bearded one let out a bark of laughter. Out here in the West, Hawkins, it's simple: whoever catches, owns. And since you're holding, that means you owe us. Elias stared at them, unblinking. He shifted his coat to the side, revealing the revolver holstered at his hip. His voice dropped lower, every word slicing the air like an axe splitting wood. If you come back, you better bring papers signed by a judge and a priest. He paused half a beat, then delivered the final line like a punch to the gut. And even then, I might still send you off with a bullet. The 2 men hesitated. In their eyes, Elias's confidence was no bluff. It was fact. The calm of a man who had buried more than a few bad men in this valley. They exchanged a look, then pulled their reins, and backed away. The last one tossed a warning over his shoulder. You have not seen the end of this, Hawkins. As the hoofbeats faded into the distance, the cabin door creaked open. Nanea stood there, half her body casting a shadow across the wooden floor, her deep black eyes still trembling from the fear she had fought to suppress. She whispered, her voice soft but heavy with the weight of a lifetime decision. If you did that for me, then I will stay. Elias looked at her, saying nothing, but the slow nod he gave said more than any words ever could. In a place colder than the snowy mountains, another fire had just begun to burn. Thank you so much for being here. If this story brought back memories of red dust afternoons, of horse hooves echoing in your chest, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. So every day, we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another story from the West. That night, the snowstorm returned fiercer than any night before. The wind howled so violently that the entire cabin shuddered with each gust, and the snow outside the window thickened into a pale, blurry sheet. Elias bolted the door tight, then dragged a wooden chair against it in case the wind tried to rip it open. The fireplace burned bright, but the cold still crept in through every crack in the walls. Nanea sat against the wall, her large frame trembling slightly, wounds still not fully healed. Elias tossed more wood into the fire, then wrapped her in the thickest blanket they had. Try to stay warm. A storm like this might last until morning, he said. Nanea looked at him for a long while, her eyes no longer wary, but as if weighing something in her mind. This spot, she touched the blanket, is still cold. Elias sat down on the chair near the fire, rubbing his hands together for heat. Just make it through tonight. The weather should ease by tomorrow. Nanea kept looking at him. Her face, usually as rigid as a mountain cliff, had softened, showing signs of weariness and something else. A trace of hesitation she tried to hide. She shifted slightly, pulling the blanket open wider. Her voice was low and rough, but every word struck the frozen air with clarity. There's room here. 2 people lying close will stay warmer. Elias froze. He knew she was right. He had survived many nights in wartime trenches the same way, sharing body heat with comrades. But this was no battlefield. This was a giant Apache woman, and he was just a solitary rancher. You sure? Elias asked. Nanea did not answer. She simply gave the blanket a small tug, an invitation, calm and firm, but carrying an unmistakable sense of hope. Elias walked over and lay down beside her. The moment their bodies touched, warmth spread quickly. Nanea's body was warmer than he expected, her skin carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and wild grass. A strange, safe feeling settled over the small cabin. Several silent minutes passed. Then Nanea turned to face Elias, her deep black eyes reflecting the firelight. She reached out and gently touched his cheek. I trust you. In that moment, Elias placed his hand behind her neck, pulling her close, until their lips met in a slow, warm kiss. Unhurried, but strong enough to melt every layer of ice she had ever built around her heart. When they pulled away, their breaths mingled like 2 trails of warm smoke. Elias whispered, You're safe here. Always. And for the first time, Nanea rested her head on his shoulder, dropping every defense she had ever held. Winter, at last, loosened its grip. The first patches of melting snow trickled down the mountain slopes, revealing damp brown earth and trembling blades of early grass under the morning sun. Elias's cabin, buried in white for so many weeks, now seemed to re-emerge into the living world. Elias opened the door earlier than usual, welcoming the first warmth of spring. But this morning, before he could step outside, he saw Nanea standing on the porch, her broad shoulders nearly filling the doorway. She was looking down at her hands, then slowly placed one large palm over her belly, a simple gesture, but enough to stop Elias in his tracks. Are you all right? He asked, his voice instinctively softening. Nanea turned to him, her eyes no longer fierce like in those early days, but deeper, calmer. She reached for Elias's hand and placed it over her stomach. His hand was burning. Her belly carried a strange, radiant warmth. There is a child, Nanea said slowly. As if each word was a vow, Elias stood still for a few seconds. Everything he had thought, everything he had not dared to think, came rushing at once. But in the end, the only thing that escaped his lips was a smile. A rare smile, for that weathered face. Well then, Elias said, gently squeezing her hand. We'll need more room, and I'll build a cradle, a strong one. Nanea looked at him for a long time, so long Elias thought she might take her words back. But then she placed her hand over his chest, right where his heart pounded hard beneath. I used to look down on you, she confessed. Thought you were weak, small, not worthy of my warrior blood. Elias exhaled lightly. Yeah, I figured. But Nanea shook her head. Now I understand. True strength is in not running away, in not fearing me, in never asking for anything. Elias let out a rough, quiet laugh. That's because I love you. For the first time, Nanea's face truly softened. No longer a warrior. No longer a wounded giant. Just a woman standing at the beginning of her own spring. She spoke quietly, like confessing something greater than any battle. And I choose you. The spring wind swept through the wide-open door, gently rustling the old curtain. Elias gave her hand another squeeze, then said, Then let's get started. We've got a lot to do to build a home. News traveled faster than wind across the prairie. Rancher Elias Hawkins marries a giant Apache woman. That one sentence was enough to send the entire town of Red Valley rushing to the little church on the hill, where Pastor Jacob usually only performed weddings for old white couples. That day, the sun was not blinding, just bright enough to shine on the traditional dress Nanea had chosen herself, lined with glistening Apache beads that followed the lines of her tall, powerful frame. When she stepped down from the wagon, the crowd fell completely silent. Some jaws dropped, some stepped back in fear, some whispered, "I have never seen a woman that tall." But when Nanea walked up beside, Elias stood beside him like a mountain guarding a quiet stream. No one felt fear anymore. What they saw instead was something strange, and yet deeply beautiful. The peace between two souls fate had thrown together like some cruel winter joke. Pastor Jacob's hands trembled as he opened the Bible. His eyes rose to meet Nanea's, nearly tall enough to brush the chapel ceiling, then dropped to Elias, the man holding a hand almost twice the size of his own. "My son," he said softly. "Are you certain?" Elias did not hesitate. He squeezed Nanea's hand, never taking his eyes off her. "She saved me from loneliness. I am just doing my part now, choosing to love her for the rest of my life." The room erupted, not in laughter or mockery, but in surprise. No one had expected a man as blunt as Elias to speak something so pure. Then, it was Nanea's turn. She stepped forward, her shadow falling across the wooden steps. Her voice rang out deep and steady, filled with the authority of a warrior. "I choose this man, not because he is stronger than me, but because his heart never backed down." She placed her hand over her belly. "And my child will choose him too, as I have. Andon, go and 2-3. Andon, go and 2-3. Andon, go and 2-3. Andon, go in dollars. I will just. Andon, go in dollars. Andon, go in dollars. Andon, go in dollars." No one breathed. Every sound in the chapel was swallowed by the weight of that moment. Pastor Jacob cleared his throat and said, "I, in the name of the Lord, now pronounce you husband and wife." Cheers, applause, horses neighing outside, all of it crashed together in a warm, chaotic celebration the likes of which Red Valley rarely saw. Elias leaned down. Nanea leaned down farther, and they kissed beneath the old chapel roof that had never known a love story quite like this one. That spring, Hunter Creek Valley felt different, not because the trees were budding or the streams were thawing, but because Elias Hawkins's little cabin now echoed with laughter, carried the warmth of something never known there before. A family. Elias stood in the yard, hammering one wooden plank after another for the new room. The rhythm of the hammer rang out steady and honest, just like the man himself. Not far from him, Nanea was gathering dried grass, her hands occasionally drifting unconsciously to her belly where a small life was quietly growing each day. She had grown used to people stopping to stare whenever she walked through Red Valley. An Apache woman over 7 feet tall, about 2 meters and 13 centimeters, with muscles carved like mountain stone. But her eyes were gentler than anyone expected. She never needed to explain herself. Her choice had already been made clear as footprints pressed into soft earth. "You should go rest for a bit." "Wind's picking up," Elias said, setting down the wood. "I am fine," Nanea replied, though she paused long enough for him to come check if she was cold. His hand rested on her shoulder, small, but firm. "Not fine by me means not fine at all," Elias said. Nanea let out a soft laugh. Once rare, her laughter had become something familiar on the porch of that cabin. "Since when did you get so stubborn?" "Probably around the time I married a woman who could lift me with one hand," Elias teased. Nanea laughed again, then bent down and kissed his forehead. She did not speak often, but every gesture held a tenderness that a warrior like her never showed to the outside world. Evening came. Golden sunlight spilled like honey across the hills. Nanea stepped out onto the porch and looked over the wide valley, once a place she ran from, nearly swallowed whole by a brutal winter. Now, the wind played gently through her hair. Elias came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you looking at?" he asked. Nanea did not turn. She simply kept watching the sky, as if seeing her entire life unfolding in the horizon ahead. Her voice was low, steady, like stone and earth. This place feels closer. Elias asked softly. Closer to what? Nanea placed her strong hand over his, gave it a quiet squeeze. Closer to you. Closer to peace. Closer. To home. The little cabin at the foot of the hill glowed with firelight. Smoke curled into the air, rising into the spring wind like a signal. A man, a once lonely rancher. A woman, a giant Apache once hunted and feared. They were no longer running. They had carved out a place of peace for themselves, where winter could not win, where the past no longer held chains, where a child was growing inside Narnia, and a new future was being written, one day at a time. Love is not some grand, glowing miracle. It is the quiet persistence of two souls brave enough to